the environment of the hotel.
Wanting to make sure that local artists got a good deal out of businesses like hotels and could remain true to their art inspired one entrepreneur to set up a business.
I'm Patrick McRae. I am the co-founder and CEO of Arctic. Arctic is an international art agency. So we exist to bridge the gap between the art and the business worlds, ensuring fair pay for artists.
What is one of the key trends of what's happening now, would you say?
In May, I saw Sebastian Bazin, the CEO of Accor, who are a global hotel brand, speak at a conference in Berlin where he said that we have to make our hotels for the locals. And if we make our hotels for the locals, then guests and holidaymakers will want to come. And that's because local people understand local spaces. They understand what restaurants are good to go to, what cafes are good to go to, and they bring a sense of confidence and conviviality to space. And I think that desire of hotels to engage with local communities has massively inspired and massively informed the fact that we're now seeing a great desire to work with local artistic communities. And so I think if hotels are open to commissioning and working with contemporary local artists, then by that very nature they will be picking up on the stories, picking up on the lived experiences of specific individual artists.
Now, when I check into a chain hotel, I want the art, like the flower triptych, to let me just be. I can embrace being left perfectly alone. But talking to Patrick has made me curious about other kinds of experiences. So I'm off to the Buckle Street Studios in Aldgate, London. It's an apart hotel. You can stay there for months if you like, living alongside the art they've chosen. And the rooms feature work by one of the artists represented by Arctic. Here I am at the Buckle Street Apart Hotel, and it's such an interesting piece. It's like a bird in flight. It's like a blue splash of a bird in flight. A kind of pale yellow. It's a bird in flight in October. Shapes, swirls. It's flying out of some kind of autumnal pile of leaves. Diagonally, across at least 2/3 of the picture, you've got swirls of two different kinds of blue, applied quickly so that the paint still looks wet. Then towards the bottom, a kind of red ochre. Feels like I'm floating in this painting. Well, yeah, you're not actually floating. I'm actually seem to be surfing this blue wave. I'm holding on to it. I'm going really quickly. There's darkness below me and there's red above me. It's like I'm flying into some kind of sunset. I can only just hold on to this. It's as though, because I'm here, part of this picture, it's really hard to hold on and talk at the same time, I can tell you. Well, it's really... my goodness. Oh, let's have a look at the signature. Oh, it's by an artist called Joanna Gilbert.
Joanna, you don't know me. I'm a poet called Edward Miller. I just want to tell you how it felt to be inside one of your paintings that was in a hotel room. It's that one with the blue splash in the middle. And after a while, I felt like I was riding on the blue splash and I was under the blue splash, but then I was the blue splash. The blue splash was me. I felt that somehow I was completing the painting by being inside it, or at least by being in the same room. I hope you don't mind me telling you all this. Hello, you've reached the number of Ian McMillan. I'm afraid I can't get to the phone right now because I'm writing poems, but please leave a message after the ride.
Hi Ian, this is Joanna Gilbert. I love hearing what people interpret and how they interpret my artwork. The painting's called Extraordinary Times, and some people think it's absolutely bonkers to kind of become the same as the painting immersed in the painting. But to me, it makes total and utter sense. Like, that's the point of my artwork, to kind of lose yourself in the depths of the colours. Thank you for letting me know what you were feeling when you were looking at my painting and completing it.
Now there's one more hotel I want to visit. It's called the Mandrake. It's in Fitzrovia in central London. I had a look at the website and it says there's constantly evolving art on display, and there are works there by artists I've never heard of, as well as pieces by masters like Salvador Dali and Marc Chagall. As soon as you walk in this hotel, you are challenged and excited. I've been told there's a chandelier that's made of human hair. This must be it, which both attracts and repels at the same time. This is like a kind of melted licorice seaweed, isn't it? Again, disconcerting if you're sitting here having your lunch. That's above you. It makes you think. Behind the bar is this amazing creature. It's part peacock, part gazelle. It's like no creature you've ever seen before.
So the artifacts we have here, a lot of them are before price, so a lot of them are actually museum items in a way.
All these changes, so there's another piece of art. A lot of the artwork in this hotel actually looks at you. It stares back at you. And a lot of everywhere you look, there are eyes looking at you. Not accusing, but actually saying, who are you?
I'm Rami Fostok, the founder and owner-operator of the Mandrake. Everywhere in every corner there's art pieces. I even have a 12-metre art piece on the back of the main lift. There's a glass panel and there's music in that space that communicates with the art piece. Every couple of months we select an artist and he or she works in the hotel and they work on a piece that guests can see, and it's a very diversified collection. I have over 50 different artists' work adorn all our walls, and each of them convey a different message to our guests. They're very much very light pieces, very spiritual and beautiful, enlightening pieces, and they're very dark pieces as well, controversial and provocative pieces. So we want you to move out of your shell and be more extraordinary.
You can start to think hard about your life in a space like this. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, the hotel is not for everyone, but I would want people to actually feel comfortable being uncomfortable in the hotel, because it's meant to make people both comfortable and uncomfortable, out of their comfort zone. But you know, your spirit and your mind should be open to receiving the different creative pieces in the hotel that will stir them.
This is my room. I'm going to open it with my electronic key. I'm excited. Gosh. And on the wall, some amazing pieces of art. This one is, it swirls. It's like a fire. It's like a fire of imagination. It is a piece that challenges you. In a chain hotel, you might get a certain kind of relaxing colour palette, but this isn't that colour palette. It's not relaxing there. There's a lot of darkness. Rami talked about the idea of light and dark and exploring both sides of who we are. There's a lot of dark in this. It's a piece that makes me think of night. Makes me think of the failure of power. Makes me think of being in some deep cavern or something. Even the light gives me a picture. Kind of consumed by the dark. I'm failing here at actually describing the piece. It's having that effect on me. So I'll just have to sit on the bed and stop talking for a bit.
So my name is Maria Ludetoft and I'm head of spiritual spiritual wellness here at the Mandarin Hotel. And today we are going to be experiencing a sound bath, a multi-instrumental sound bath using rain stick, koshi wind chimes, crystal and alchemy singing bowls, and a little bit of gong vibrations.
This sound envelops you so that as you're listening to it, you move into a space that's beyond thinking. I do seem to have some language going through my head in a strange kind of way. I'll just step away from the gongs and just say the words, see what they sound like. Words written in the steam of a hotel bathroom mill, not by me, but by the art. As the steam fades and I fade, it finishes the letters of my name. So I found myself with art that just wants me to be. I found myself with work that wants me to complete it. And this last piece, well, I felt like it somehow wanted to complete me. A little slow tonight.
Yes, it is, Mr. McMillan. Oh, hi. Nice to see you again. It looks like you've got a wrapped piece of art there. Are you checking out?
Yes, I'd just like to keep this piece of art behind my back. If that's all right with you, if you just distract the man behind the counter. So there are all these art hotels, and every hotel room I go into has art in it. There's more and more of it. There's art everywhere. What do you think that tells us about the moment that we're in?
Well, if we're thinking about pilgrimage, religious pilgrimage was the principal reason for moving for quite a lot of our modern era, early modern era, medieval period, Renaissance, pilgrimages and so on. It's no longer the church nave, but it's actually the hotel lobby or the gallery space, the atrium, that is the place where we gather and commune and collect, and therefore it's art in a way that's pulling us towards those. There was a very famous theory in the 1930s by Walter Benjamin, who said that the aura of art was being destroyed by mechanical reproduction. So, in other words, mass art, cinema, radio, all these sorts of things were in a sense destroying the aura. But everyone, I think, now thinks that's not quite worked. It's almost as if art has acquired a new kind of aura. It's not quite religious, but it's very parallel to that. It's something that we're heading towards and wanting to transcend. So on a micro scale, when you go into your art hotel room, perhaps what the art is also doing is wanting you to transcend your old self and become another one, at least for a night.
This picture is called The Style of the Past in Shetland. There's either two flowers or two clouds. I can't decide. If the flowers are going to rain petals. The sunset over the sea. The sun slowly making its way down to some waves that are as flat as a cap.
Hotel Room Art was presented by Ian McMillan and produced by Faith Lawrence.
2024 is a big election year in America.
I believe in free and fair elections and peaceful transfer of power.
And whoever ends up as US president will have, of course, a massive impact on the rest of the world too.
They will embrace our platform of national greatness and glory to America.
But what do we really need to understand about how the American election works?
In any presidential election year, there are always known unknowns and unknown unknowns.
What is a caucus? Why do they have TV debates? And the Electoral College, how does it really work? Understand the US election. Me, Justin Webb, next Monday to Friday lunchtime at 1:45 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
BBC News at midday. Ukraine says it has destroyed a Russian ship in occupied Crimea. The Novaya cask, thought to be what's known as a landing vessel, was hit by a cruise missile overnight in the port of Feodosia. One person was killed and 2 were wounded. Russia is understood to use landing ships to carry drones to attack Ukraine. Howard Gethin from the BBC's Russia Monitoring Service and a former Navy officer says the strike would be a blow to Moscow.
Russia's air defences seem to be quite incapable at the moment of stopping these Storm Shadow missiles. The significance of it is that Russia's quite short of these kind of landing ships. The ships that they have got in their navy are mostly from the Soviet Union, Soviet era. They're quite old ships. They were actually in service when I was in the Royal Navy, and they're very short of these type of ships.
Iraq has called a series of US airstrikes against targets in the country a hostile act. The Pentagon said it hit 3 facilities which it believed were being used by Iran-backed militia groups. They were in response to yesterday's attack on an airbase near Erbil that wounded 3 US military personnel. India says it is dispatching 3 warships to the Arabian Sea after a merchant vessel heading to one of its ports was hit by a drone last week. The Israeli-flagged tanker MV Chem Pluto was damaged but safely made it to Mumbai. Our South Asia correspondent Ambarasan Etirajan says it shows how current events in the Red Sea are affecting global trade.
We still do not know who carried out this attack. Now what it shows is that whatever was happening in the Red Sea, where the Houthi rebels were targeting many of the vehicles, now the impact can be seen far away, more than 2,000 kilometers away from the Red Sea.
Israel says it has carried out more than 100 airstrikes in Gaza in the last 24 hours as it fulfills Benjamin Netanyahu's pledge to intensify the campaign against Hamas. Some of the targets were in Rafah near the Egyptian border, which had been previously designated a safe zone. The King's Christmas message again dominated the airwaves on Christmas Day, with more than 7 million people tuning in to watch. The Strictly Come Dancing Christmas special was second, ahead of Doctor Who. The overnight ratings include people watching on TV and some catch-up services. Our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mzimba has been looking at the figures.
The King's 10-minute broadcast to the nation and to the Commonwealth was shown on multiple channels, including BBC One and ITV1, and was watched by a total television audience of 7.5 million viewers, according to the ratings agency Barb. That's a drop of more than 3 million from his first Christmas broadcast as monarch in 2022. The Strictly Come Dancing Christmas special was the second most watched show with just over 5 million viewers. Ncuti Gatwa's first full episode of Doctor Who was third with around 4.75 million viewers. With audiences increasingly using catch-up services, the true overall performance of the Christmas Day lineup won't be known until early next year.
Police in Paris are investigating the murder of 5 people who were found inside a flat in the northeast of the city yesterday. Officials say the victims are a woman and her 4 children who were aged between 9 months and 10 years old. Local media are reporting their father has been arrested. An artificial intelligence expert says the technology could create seismic change in every industry within the next 4 years. Aidan Meller said that next year would be a very big year for AI, with a number of major product launches. He told Radio 4's Today programme that one of the biggest of those would be the rollout of ChatGPT-5, which will have a new level of capability.
Suddenly, rather than just doing it as a text-based editor, it will actually then start to do action. So you could say to your phone, could you book me the restaurant on Monday at 7? ChatGPT-5 will be able to phone up the restaurant, speak to them audibly, say, hi, I'm trying to get an appointment for 7, and book it for you, and then come back to you and say, yeah, we've now done that, you've now got the booking.
Aidan Meller speaking there. BBC News.
Now on Radio 4, Joni Mitchell's life and music, told in her own words.
Let's make history together. Hold nothing back in this moment. And please welcome back to the Newport stage, for the first time since 1969, Joni Mitchell!
In order to get the right spirit into the music, there has to be a sense of passion about it. To make an ideal communication, to get close to the truth of anything, you have to be able to address yourself to at least 4 spirits. There has to be something there for the heart, there has to be something there for the intellect, there has to be something there for sensuality and sensation, and there has to be some wit, some things that are direct hits, brief and clear. And if you get the right amount of those vegetables into the broth, then it's satisfying to me personally.
I'm a mutt, I belong to nothing. There's a great liberty in that, and I'm a freedom freak. I'm not a copycat. I'm pretty original. I'm an original. I'm fluid. I'm not a herd animal.
I come from a place in Canada called Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which to some people sounds like a disease. Up there we joke about Kalamazoo, Michigan. When I found out that that place really does exist, I was amazed. But the winters in Saskatchewan are very cruel. The seasons are cruel, and the temperature changes as much as 150 degrees in a year, which is pretty radical. And when winter comes and December comes and January is threatening to come, with temperatures dropping down to 50 below zero, the people begin to act very peculiarly, and they say, hey, why can't I go someplace else for the winter?
There's a man who's been out sailing in a decade full of dreams, and he takes her to a schooner, and he treats her like a queen, bearing beads from California with their amber stones and green. He has called her from the harbor, he has kissed her with his freedom, he has heard her off to starboard, in the breaking and the breathing of the water weeds, while she was busy being free.
I have a very early memory of being walked on a leash. You know, they used to put children on those leashes, and I had on a little white kind of snowsuit, and we passed a Woolworths, and Woolworths had a wedge-shaped opening to it, and in the roof of the exterior of the building was a kind of a speaker, tin speaker, and some kind of music spilling out there. And I stopped on my leash and began to bounce up and down, sing with great enthusiasm. My mother gave me a good tug, you know. I remember thinking that was very insensitive of her. So, you know, at an early age, you know, music was a great pocket to be in.
I just want to tell you tonight that I have a little bit of music in my family tree, so to speak. On my mother's side, there was my grandmother who came out from Scotland to pioneer Saskatchewan. And that was before the Mounties were even royal. They were sort of northwestish. And she didn't know it at the time, but she was a frustrated rock and roll organist all that time. I know that now. I haven't had the heart to really break it to her. But she got out there and found that the audiences were few and far between. There was her brother and the other man who she married. And a few Indians who just couldn't get behind the kind of music that she liked to play. She played the church organ for a while in a Presbyterian church in Saskatchewan, and as a result, every time that she used to get upset, she'd come home and she'd play the organ at home in the minor key. So my mother grew up not being able to stand anything that had a minor key in it anywhere, and that was my musical heritage on that side of the family. Then on the other side of the family, there was my grandfather who made violins. He didn't play them, but he made them. And my father said one day, well, he would like to be a musician, and he had $5, and times were hard then. $5 didn't buy very much of an instrument, so he went into a pawn shop and he said, I would like to buy an instrument for $5, and they gave him a trumpet, so my father became a trumpet player. And for a while, he was the leader of the Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan Most Done Military Marching Band. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Be about 6 or 7. We were all seated at this table when suddenly on the radio came Edith Piaf and Les Compagnons de Chanson singing this song, and I remember, like, as her voice entered into the male choir, that I had goosebumps. You know, I think I probably dropped my cake fork. When I was 7, I took piano lessons, mainly because I had this urge to write music, and recently I found an old scribbler that I had written. Primitively, I'd written out left and right hand piano for a song called Robin Walk, so I guess I wrote my first song instrumental at 7.5, and then it was many years until it occurred to me to write anything.
I came to music late. I took a year of piano lessons, and And my teacher hit me over the knuckles with a ruler and said, "Why would you want to play by ear when you could have the masters on your fingers?" So I quit.
Polio turns communities into ghost towns and death strikes.
Nobody knows where I caught polio. It took them a few days to figure out what I had. I was shipped by ambulance plane to Saskatoon. The polio ward was annexed off of St. Paul's Hospital with trailers with ramps leading up to them. So we were isolated from the rest of the hospital population, and it was presided over by these rustling nuns. And as Christmas neared, there was a terrible longing to go home. And my mother ventured in a couple of times, which was very brave. I just remember her worried eyes over the masks that they wore. And she brought me a small Christmas tree and decorations, which I still have 3 of them that I put on my Christmas tree every year that are left. The therapist had been in that day, and I'd said to him, "I want to go home for Christmas." "Well, you can't," he said. I said, "Well, why not?" "Well, because you can't walk." "Well, what if I walked?" I said. He said, "Well, you can't." I said, "Well, you can't even stand up." I said, "What if I stood up and walked?" And he just hung his head. He didn't answer me. So I thought, okay, I'm going home for Christmas. Send in your therapist. They used to bring these scalding rags in cauldrons, and they'd pin them all over you, and it would bring you up to just before blistering. It was scalding. And the therapist would come in and try to bend you back into shape, and it was terribly painful. So one day I said, okay, I want to try and walk. I don't know who I prayed to, but I think I prayed to the tree. But I made a promise to whatever it was. I addressed it to the tree. I said, I am not a cripple. I am not a cripple. I am not a cripple. I'm going home for Christmas. If I can pull this off, I'll make it up to you. So I walked. I went home for Christmas. So polio, in a certain way, did me a solid. It kind of germinated an inner life, I think, also. A sense of the mystic. Definitely, it was mystical to come back from that disease. In the 6th grade, I was pinning up some drawings for a parent-teacher day when a new teacher, Kratzman, came up to me and said, "You like to paint?" I said, "Yes. If you can paint with a brush," he said, "you can paint with words. I'll see you next year." He gave me permission to be both a writer and a painter. I spaced out all the way through the school system. I drew clothes, I wrote poems, I drew pictures of beatniks and hoods and funny sayings, And thank God, because most of what they taught was wrong anyway. I flunked physics. If they taught quantum physics, I would have been intrigued. Light is intermittent matter? That's some interesting stuff. Let's talk about it.
The radio was, for many years, as a child, was full of ballads and classical programming and Montevani, and it was fairly bland, although there was a lot of melody on the radio in those days.
Here's Art Brown.
Whoa, and then came rock and roll. Little Richard and Chuck Berry were like the call of the wild.
Lucy, you won't do your sister's will. Lucy, you won't do your sister's will. You ran out the door, but I love you still.
When rock and roll came roaring onto the scene with all the controversy that it included, it was mostly black and it was raw and raging. Lucille would be a good example of that, or What I Say, Ray Charles, Johnny Be Good. And it was great. I mean, it stirred up your feet, it stirred up your whole body. Next thing you knew, you wanted to go to 3 or 4 dances a week and nothing else was so important. After a few years, the music scene shifted, and with the coming of a lot of white rock and roll, some of it was excellent, and some of it got very formulated. And then you got your Annette Funicellos and your Fabians and your kind of media-made artists. And the spirit got more, middle class or more genteel. It made it palatable. Rock and roll became respectable in a certain way. And it made for a very kind of dull pocket of music. And it really was the Beatles that lifted that out. Everybody was waiting for Messiah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Everybody knows that they were the Messiah.
Well, she was just 17. You know what I mean.
During that bland kind of period, my interests began to searched through other styles of music, and Cloudburst, Lambert Hendricks and Ross were kind of my heroes in that time.
Hey baby, I'm gonna tell you about your love.
Then with the Beatles opening up the music again, lyrics began to become important. With the Beatles bringing the beat back strongly and jazz and folk music providing a kind of an introspective vacation, so to say, from rock and roll in the middle. And along came Dylan, and he kind of put the two things together.
All the ragmen draw circles up and down the block. I'd ask him what the matter was, but I know that he don't talk.
Up until the point that his work began to inspire me, I sang British Isles, folk ballads, Ewan MacColl songs, Judy Collins repertoire. It occurred to a lot of us then that you could sing the scribblings that you had in notebooks, like the private poetic scribblings.
Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of a star. If you know it, sing. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the pain.
I got pregnant. I was the only virgin in art school. You've been holding on to this precious thing, and I just kind of stupidly got caught out immediately. So I had to create a smokescreen. The music was not of interest. This is a trick that fate, because I didn't know I had the gift. I hadn't started to write. There was no ambition. There was no, I had a nice voice, I guess. I played okay. But there was no real gift. It was just something that was happening and was going to die out soon. It was a way to get money to smoke and to bowl, because that's what I did at art school too. I came in there with no frills. I had to earn half my fare at art school because my parents disapproved, and there was nothing left over. So singing in the clubs was fun, and it afforded me a little bit of income that I wouldn't have had.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we have for your entertainment Joni Anderson. We know you'll enjoy her as much as we have. Let's give her a little bit of a welcome now. Miss Joni Anderson.
First song I'd like to do tells about what happens when a man becomes so involved with almighty liquor that he begins to think of it as a woman, and he calls his bottle Nancy Whiskey.
The right thing to do to protect your parents was to get out of town, go into a home. Well, in '65, the homes were full. There was no way I could take her out of the hospital into a blizzard with no job, no roof over my head. There was no way I could take her. And there weren't even foster homes available at that time because there was such a glut of unwed children. But she was beautiful, and she found her way into a foster home. And I tried to get work and get a setup that I could bring her to. Well, in that time period, I couldn't get any work in Toronto because I couldn't get $160 to get into the union. I was beset by predators, like people trying to take advantage of the situation. A lot of human ugliness came at me because I was in it. They tortured me in Toronto in general, out of disrespect. But it was the dark ages then for women. I was a criminal. I was a fallen woman. It was a very difficult situation.
He went to California. Hearing that everything's warmer there. So you write him a letter under eyes of blue. He sends you a poem and she's lost to you. Little just a little green, like the color when the spring is born. There'll be crocuses to bring to school tomorrow, just a little green.
When I married Chuck Mitchell, I should have been a runaway bride on our wedding day, so it didn't last very long. Both Sides Now and all of those songs that came out of that. To get away from him, I would go down to the Tuttle House. He lived in the black neighborhood there, and I would sit there and drink coffee and write. And so the writing began to happen. He tried to gain ownership of it. He set up a publishing company. I had him set up too because I knew I had to get out of that marriage.
I was reading a book, and I haven't finished it yet, called Henderson the Rain King. And there's a line in it that I especially got hung up on. It was about when he was flying to Africa, searching for something. He said that in an age when people could look up and down at clouds, they shouldn't be afraid to die. And so I got this idea from both sides now. There are a lot of sides to everything, and so the song is called From Both Sides Now.
Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way. Now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done. Clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all.
I was married to a man who had a degree in literature, who knew I'd never read anything and basically thought I was stupid. He liked the package. He married the package, and then he thought he'd Svengali a brain into it, kind of. So he married what he was pretty certain was a dumb blonde. I remember when I wrote Both Sides Now, he kind of ridiculed me. He said, "Oh, what do you know about life? I've looked at life from both sides now. You're only 21, you know." Well, I had lived quite a bit of life. I survived quite a few diseases.
And if you care, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away.
The worst thing that could befall a woman at that time was to have a child out of wedlock, and I'd gone through that and the accompanying prejudice and terror, and I'd been tortured in the hospital. By the time I was 21, I had experienced a lot of life, a lot of joy. I had terrific teenage years, like I lost my athletic ability at 9 and went from being first and second chosen for teams to being not chosen at all. So I had a social crisis in my early years, but that made me have an inner life and made an artist out of me, I guess. That's where I forged my identity. I always thought of myself as an artist. And you can ask kids all the way back to the first grade. Joan was always the artist, right? I began to write, and when I began to write, my music came out kind of semi-classical because what I really loved was Tchaikovsky and Chopin and Rachmaninoff. The piece of music that made me want to be a musician was Variations on a Theme by Paganini. Being a lover of nocturnes in particular, not so much symphonies because they're all in the same key, they're too predictable. The nocturnes or the rhapsodies, that kind of classical music, Debussy in particular. My mother had 3 records, Claire de Lune, they were all Moonlight stuff, Moonlight Sonata, and my father had Little Harry James and some Leroy Anderson, trumpet teacher. So I grew up loving horns, especially muted trumpets, and these melodic melodies, and that's still the essence of my sound, I think.
I woke today and found frost perched on the town. It hovered in a frozen sky, then gobbled summer down. When the sun turns traitor cold and all the trees stand shivering in a naked road, I get the urge for going, but I never seem to go.
Oh, so far, I haven't signed anything. I've been offered a couple of companies.
Sign. Please.
I would love to record. You know, I'm getting excited about the idea. I'm also getting a little frightened because of what recording entails nowadays. You know, all the beautiful things that are no longer in your hands. So you have to hire the right producer and the right arranger in order to make a record, you know, as interesting as it possibly can be. And it's choosing those people that sort of, I'm always afraid that I won't get the right person and they won't give me the sound that I want, you know. It's sort of out of the performer's hands nowadays.
So we've got the war, we've got children out of wedlock, we've got drugs, we've got roses blue, that's certainly a facet of our times. So instead of being such a personal album, this isn't nearly as personal an album as the last one. It's really personal. God, this is your life. It's really horrible. That's one reason I don't like it now. I just suddenly don't want all those things to go out to so many people, because before I've only been playing for a small circle of friends. It was so intimate. It was like something I wanted to share with those people. Now everybody, you know, like, that's really a lot of people. That's will never know
to
me.
communicate to that many people.
When I first saw your gallery, I like the ones of ladies. Then you began to hang up me. You studied to portray me in ice and greens and old blue jeans and naked in the roses. Then you got into funny scenes and all your work discloses. Lady, don't love me now, I am dead. I am a saint and I'm your mid. I had no heart, that's what you said. 'Cause I can be cruel, but let me be gentle with you.
Of course I'm changing. You know, my environment is changing. Of course I'm a critic of it. I wrote for relationships. I wrote to both men and women in terms of their relationship. I was never a feminist because it was too apartheid. I mean, any feminists that I ever met were man-haters. The bulk of the camp that I met were man-haters. They saw it all as them and us, where I was constantly in the company of men, usually large entourages of men. I was much more comfortable in the company of men because I was used to it than in the company of women, who seemed kind of foreign to me, up until recently, actually.
In Los Angeles, there's a part of the city that's called the Canyons, and that's Laurel Canyon, Topanga Canyon, and the hills run through the middle of the city, and if you get up to the top of the hill, you can see cities stretching for 20 miles in all directions all around the hills. Laurel Canyon used to be where all of the Western television bit actors and movie actors lived, and that's sort of been abandoned, and a new change has come about in the neighborhood, and that's where all the rock and roll stars live now, or at least a lot of them live in Laurel Canyon or Topanga Canyon. So you have a lot of little teeny bops running all the way through saying, oh, is that a Buffalo Springfield? Let's go ask him. But what if it isn't? You know, then what do we do if he's just nobody? Just an ordinary person. Wow. What a drag. So as a result, Laurel Canyon is sort of being evacuated slowly by mindless rock and roll singers who just can't take it anymore. And they're trying to find a more secret place. But there are some wonderful people who live on those hills. And they all ended up there with their various talents. And they're so representational of the good people there. I just wrote a little song called Daddy's King. Trina wears her wampum beads. She fills her drawing book with line, sewing lace on widow's weeds and filigree on leaf and vine. Vine and leaf are filigree, and her coat's a second-hand one, trimmed with antique luxury. She is Our Lady of the Canyon.
I've always been somewhat reluctant. I like small clubs. I am a ham, and I am an enjoyer. I enjoy partying, so a club is kind of a party. It's fairly loose. But the big stage, you know, timing is of the essence. I work in 50 different tunings, and then you receive the criticism for that, you know, like, and it's a real pain in the butt.
They listened for 3 days, and today they sounded the retreat and headed for home. The sponsors said it was going to be 3 days of peace and music. It was that all right, and much more. Estimates of the crowd ranged up to more than 300,000, and it was that size that caused most of the trouble. That and the rainstorms that turned the big dairy meadow into a mud farm.
The next song that I'm going to play is about one of these pop festivals that they've been having around the world lately. It's one that I didn't really get to go to. I'd been playing the night before in Chicago with a band, friends of mine, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young, etc., etc. And it was their first professional appearance, and we were all kind of excited about it. And the next night we were supposed to all play in Woodstock, and I had to do a TV show the next day, so I kind of got left behind because they were having problems getting people in and getting them back out again and everything. So I stayed home in New York and I watched it on television all day and saw everybody there playing and singing, and it was really a nice festival, I guess, and from the looks of everything. And well, I wrote a little song for my friends to sing and for myself to sing as well, and it's called Woodstock. It goes like this.
When I reflect back on what the 60s felt like and what made them distinctive, there was a common will to goodness. Part of it was that it was fashionable to be good. It was fashionable to be kind. It was hip to do the right thing. So now you had masses of people, the bulk of the population curve, all with the long hair, which was the flag of belonging to that community. You had a majority behaving like a minority, persecuted majority, poor to middle class to rich kids, all kind of evened out and being attacked by the powers that be. It was a phenomenon. That's what I don't think you can duplicate, is that curve and that phenomenon. As the spirit wore down, and I believe Woodstock was the climax of it, as it wound down, we entered into the 70s, which was a period of apathy. It was a sense of failure. In that introspective period, I believe people tried a lot of self-help and spiritual programs, trying to maintain the idealism, trying to change themselves, realizing that they couldn't change the world, trying to change themselves as individuals, still working on that idealism. By the end of the 70s, I believe that most of them had given up on that, and we entered into the greedy 80s, where it was no longer fashionable to be kind, it was no longer hip to be nice, to be as caustic and as backbiting and as undermining, like that song of Elvis Costello's, "You're nobody in this town unless you're a bastard." There's an element of truth to that globally and in this decade. You know, it's hip to be evil. So in this climate, I don't know, although you're seeing a change in consciousness now in terms of fashion. We're seeing a trend where it's becoming hip again to think. It's not considered negative to have insight and overview. Here in America, I think they're beginning to realize that we are no longer number one, which is good, gives us a chance here to develop some character. England probably had no character either when it ruled the waves. You know, I think it's something that that comes from, it's all black and white. You're a winner or you're a loser when you're on top. To save the world at this point requires such radical change in the human psyche, you know, a selflessness, an overview. And we don't have that en masse, and without it, we will extinct ourselves. So how do we get that? I mean, I've been asking myself that question for many years, and there's no way, nothing short of the miraculous would bring us to that kind of communal consciousness. And yet it seemed, there was the illusion, at least, that at that event, that consciousness lifted up off the ground and was shared by a large number of people.
Walking down the road, I asked him, where are you going? And this he told me. He said, I'm going down.
I thought fame was going to be a horrible experience, which until you get used to it, it is. You know, you just have to deal with an incredible amount of stupidity because this place is mentally ill with celebrities. So you have to see a lot of mental illness coming at you, you know, like, and you go, oh my God, this country is so sick. I'm not a kid that played air guitar in the bedroom and go, oh, I'm going to be rich and famous and all of that. I felt sorry for stars. I hated it. Hated it.
I come here to lose the smile. Feel like I'm a cog in something turning round and round.
When I realized how popular I was becoming, oh my God, a lot of people are listening to me. Well, then they better find out who they're worshiping. Let's see if they can take it. Let's get real. So I wrote Blue, which horrified a lot of people. It created a lot of attention that was really weird. And so then I bought a property in British Columbia and dropped out. Because what had happened is they're looking at me, and all I've done is reveal human traits. They haven't seen themselves in it. At the point that they see themselves in it, the communication is complete.
Songs are like tattoos. You know I've been to sea before. Crown and anchor me, or let me sail away. Hey, there is a song for you to incarnate underneath the skin, an empty space to fill in. There's so many sinking now, you gotta keep thinking you can make it through these waves. Acid, booze, and ass, needles, guns, and grass, lots of
At the time that it was recorded, and I could show you on later albums the absence of this, and then on later ones gaining it back. But the thing about it was that I couldn't look at people without weeping. I mean, my jive detector, like all drowning people, was set so low, and there was almost a psychic thing where I could see through people, and I was sure that they could see through me. I felt like we were all cellophane, but that was recorded during that time period, so I was incapable of guile. Well, you need a certain amount of guile for self-defense and certain, you know, friendly jive, fooling around. I didn't have that, so I was just dripping in earnestness and sincerity. I'd lost my sense of humor. As a result, it's like the London Philharmonic. Real emotion is real emotion. And there is a lot of stuff that doesn't date because we're still going through that change, like Blue. There's so many sinking now, you got to keep thinking you can make it through these waves. You know, acid, booze, and all the drug pitfalls that kids are heir to. In that way, it's like Kipling. Blue and Kipling's If have a lot in common. It's like you're down to the bare bone. If you listen to that music and you see me, you're not getting anything out of it. If you listen to that music and you see yourself, it'll probably make you cry and you'll learn something about yourself, and now you're getting something out of it.
It's coming on Christmas, they're cutting down trees, they're putting up reindeer and singing songs of joy and peace. So I wish I had a river I could skate away on. But it don't snow here, it stays pretty green. I'm gonna make a lot of money, then I'm gonna quit this crazy scene. I wish I had a river I could skate away on. I wish I had a river so long I would teach my feet to fly. Oh, I wish I had a skate away on. I made my baby cry.
Pain is a teacher. One of the best, actually. A lot of cultures simulate it, the penitentes, because, you know, it produces visions and insights. And, you know, just the natural course of diseases that I've had to fight off. Each one of them has germinated some other quality. As Nietzsche says, that which doesn't kill me makes me strong.
The bed's too big, the frying pan's too wide.
Music is kind of a romance language. Without a certain amount of chemistry between players, it's kind of lifeless. I mean, when I was working on Court and Spark, I told Henry Louis, set me up facing the drummer, John Guerin. We had just met. We lived together for some years after that. But he had this look in his eyes, you know, when he played, you know, and I said, you gotta set up the vocal booth facing the drummer because he gave me this fiery support, you know, and it pushed the music to a level that wouldn't have otherwise achieved. One of my favorite tracks to dance to is this Burundi war piece. It's just full of like licks that later isolated and repeated became pockets of rock and roll. For instance, on Hissing of Summer Lawns, I did a piece and I isolated a Bo Diddley figure from this passage and looped it and ran it over and over again. If you listen to it closely, there are all kinds of Chuck Berry-isms and Little Richard-isms floating through it.
Rousseau walks on trumpet paths, safaris to the heart of all that jazz.
I'm a curious person and also have a lot of curiosity. It wasn't so much that I'd always wanted to do it or even that I was a great fan of Mingus's music, you know, but he called out to me to do a project with him. First project that he approached me with, I passed on because I couldn't see how I could do it. Then he proceeded to write 6 new melodies, which he called Joni 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then he kind of inveigled me to New York City with Flattery.
Of the darkness in men's minds, what can you say that wasn't marked by history or the TV news today.
I was very nervous. He had a reputation for being a very, very hard taskmaster. His apprentices, were used to black eyes, and he'd take a swing at them if he felt that they were playing, I guess, emotionally dishonest or whatever. He could be pretty lethal, So I went, and as soon as I saw him, there was a look on his face which I tried to paint on the Mingus cover, that wry look over his shoulder, like just up to no good, just delicious mischief. As soon as I saw that look on his face, I thought, oh, this will be fun, He had a great spirit. And it was an opportunity to apprentice under a great master. I know friends of mine who were jazz musicians. I wasn't a jazz musician, but a folk singer that played with jazz musicians, you might say, or God knows what. So the idea of working with him made me a source of envy to many of my friends. And one by one, I brought a lot of those people into play on the record. There were a lot of people kind of lined up, honored to be working on his last project.
I'm down to roll at times. I'm stuck in a slot that's hot. I keep hearing bells all around me.
At that point, I had gotten used to being a cottage industry, sitting in kind of comfortable obscurity. It was described that I had entered into jazz, which wasn't entirely true. The jazz community didn't see it as jazz. It didn't bear any resemblance to jazz forms. I was in a kind of a no man's land. I remember getting a letter from Joe Smith, who was the president of the company at that time, and he said in all his years in the industry, he had never been so proud to release a record as this one. Then he shipped 5 copies. See, I've got this system of playing that is so peculiar. I have 50 different tunings that I use, and tonight I'll be playing in, I think, 8 or 9 of them. And while they're similar in certain ways, because I've tried to make this set like in a family of tunings, it's kind of like typing on a typewriter where your letters keep moving around. So from time to time, I land on the figures from the last tune in it, so I just did that, forgive me.
Gonna raise a fuss, now I'm gonna raise a heart. Been working all summer, trying to raise a dollar. Well, that's Summertime Blues. That's a different tune, isn't it? I only know that one first to Boney Maroney.
Yeah, so
About the red blue jeans.
A gypsy, a Sikh, came up to me in a booth in New York one day and insisted on telling me my past lives. He said they were sticking out all over me and he had to tell me. I said, I don't want to know. I said, you're going to tell me I'm Cleopatra or something in another life, because everybody was Cleopatra. No, he said, it's your first incarnation as a woman. He said, in my last life I was a bird, in the life before that I was an English gent of all things. And in the life before that, and he said this with considerable distaste, I was an Arab rug merchant. And that's the one I thought, that's true, because I have this affinity for textiles, and I could sit all day with a samovar of coffee, just like wheeling and dealing and feeling fabric.
Rock and roll with the blue jeans on.
If a person likes a song that I've written about something specific, it's going to bounce off something that happened in their life. So it's the same with my own songs. I rewrite a lot of things to bring them up to date. Ever since man got the concept of one God and himself in God's image, he's been trying to pave everything over with his own work. I think in a way it's better to sort of think of things in terms of the rocks having a spirit and the trees having a spirit, and that concept of God being a part of everything. I'm not trying to get religious on you up here, but I don't think that man's going to really be contented until he's paved and flooded everything, and by then it's too late, This is a tune called You Really Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone.
They paved paradise put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got till it's gone. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot. Took all the trees, put them in a tree museum. And they charged all the people $1.50 just to see you. Don't it always seem to go? You don't know what you got till it's gone. They pay paradise, put up a parking lot.
I think that my work has always been realistic. I think I've worked with the times at hand. The times, it is not me that has gotten pessimistic. It's the times that have gotten more difficult. I'm just a witness. There's nothing colored that isn't happening with great regularity, especially in Los Angeles, which is kind of the center of change, at least for America. A lot of things spread out from Los Angeles. Right now, it's a terrifically difficult city to live in, dangerous city to live in. So I think people would like me to just be introverted and bleed for them forever. You know, they would be most happy if I would do that.
Yellow tractor come took away my house, pushed around my land.
But you have to grow. The climate when I wrote my early work in California was so very different. People were courteous drivers. We didn't lock our doors at night. If you signaled to turn left, you know, people said, oh, please be my guest. Now, it's a very mean driving town. If you signal, people feel that you're trying to get ahead of them, and nobody's going to get ahead of anyone in LA. Everyone hates everyone. Everybody's always flipping you the bird. It wasn't this way in the 60s. So society has changed all around me. People's nervous systems are shot. Pop is young, so we will see if the pop, quote unquote, will allow me to survive. If I don't sell enough records, which is possible that I won't, basically because of this prejudice against middle-aged women, for the last 15 or 20 years, depending on what country you're talking about, I've been out of favor, which is just typical of pop, no matter what I do.
Tomorrow is Sunday. Now there's only one day left to go.
There's a possibility that I will not sell enough records to have a contract, in which case I'll paint. I've always wanted out of this business.
Weekends drive me mad. Holidays are hard to say, 'cause you don't go below my window. No one knows I'm here.
I was ready to get off it. It is a bit of a rat race now, with the radio stations in America locking in and the public attitude according to journalism being extremely fickle at the moment. I don't think that the people are nearly as fickle as the writers would have us believe, but they love to put them up and tear them down at a rapid rate, you know, and it's justifiable, I think, at this point to just say, oh, you know, I'd rather paint. All things considered, I'd rather paint.
You look so beautiful. Time has been untruthful. Heaven knows.
Oh, I still got loads of musical ideas and avenues to explore. It's not that I've run out of ideas or anything, and once I begin to do it, it's pleasurable, and it's as pleasurable as the moment. Like touring, initially I didn't really want to go out on tour, but once the rehearsal was behind us and we were out on the road, it's been fantastic. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. It's just switching gears. That's the part, I guess, that, you know, that's where my laziness comes in.
One day I just disappear. And I took these two great rooms up here. With you. Only when you walk by. Below my window.
I've had a very interesting and a very challenging life. a lot of battles, just disease after disease after, I mean, I shouldn't be here. But I have a tremendous will to live and a tremendous joie de vivre, alternating with irritability.
Woke up, it was a Chelsea morning, and the first thing that I heard was a song outside my window, and the traffic wrote the words. It came ringing up like Christmas bells, and wrapping up like pipes and drums. Oh, won't you stay? We'll put on the day, and we'll wear it till the night comes.
I think I'm pretty much the same as I was when I was 17 in a lot of ways.
And the first thing that I saw was the sun through yellow curtains and a rainbow on the wall. The red, green and gold to welcome you, crimson crystal beads to beckon. Oh, won't you stay?
I would say that the main change is kind of an awakening of a social consciousness and the looking at a lot of wrinkle cream ads.
The curtain closes and the rainbow runs away. I will bring you incense hours by night, by candlelight, by jewellight, if only you will stay. Pretty baby, won't you look up? It's a Chelsea morning.
Joni Mitchell verbatim was produced by Des Shaw, edited by Chris O'Shaughnessy, and is a Zinc media production for BBC Radio 4. Now it's time for a look at the Boxing Day weather with Helen Willis.
Arlene, thank you very much indeed. Yes, chillier today, but it's bright. In fact, sunny for some. So great for getting out for a brisk walk. But it is just a brief ridge of high pressure and fine weather. The calm before the storm. Storm Gerrit is gathering force in the Atlantic. It's been named by the Met Office. Already the warnings are numerous for tomorrow. So no doubt some higher level warnings to come as well with time. The website, the BBC weather website, has more detail. For England and Wales, the rest of today, I think sunniest in the north, hazier sunshine in the south because the cloud will thicken and rain will follow into Cornwall before dark. And it's a chillier day at 6 to 10 degrees Celsius, but the sunshine compensates. Now this evening and overnight that rain will sweep in on a strengthening wind to all parts. In fact there'll be a spell of snow over the hills of northern England for a time, which means tomorrow gets off to a wet and a windy start. Rain and the hill snow will clear in the morning, but there'll be plenty of heavy showers then following in, and a spell of even windier weather later in the day. Damaging winds, gusts 60, 70 miles an hour for the hills and the coast, and we're talking a lot of rain, a good 50 millimetres, possibly more over the hills. Northern Ireland, bright for the rest of the day, about 6 degrees. The evening and night, though, see those temperatures rising as that storm Gerrit moves in. Rain sets in around midnight on gale or severe gale force winds again, damaging winds. 30, possibly 40 millimetres of rain, which should clear in the morning to blustery showers and some even windier weather later. And for Scotland, crisp, sunny afternoon, 2 or 3, but early frost and ice. Later in the night, snow sets in. We're talking about heavy snow for Scotland. Gusts of wind 70 to 80 miles an hour through tonight and tomorrow, and significant rain throughout tomorrow, as well as that hill snow. Arlene.
Thank you.
There certainly has been something strange in the air lately.
It's not too late to hear all your favourite Christmas programmes from Radio 4.
Every Womble had been allowed out onto the common to find a gift.
And I took it home and the dog wouldn't eat it. So.
Oh, wow. It really gives me a thrill to be out here making the most of the limited light.
Then you have different families coming together to celebrate as one.
Sprouts. Do not forget Sprouts.
Christmas from Radio 4. Find your favourites on BBC Sounds.
On 92 to 95 FM, 198 longwave on digital radio and on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 4, UK Station of the Year.
Hello and welcome to The World at One with me, Johnny Diamond. A huge explosion and a vast fireball. Russia's fleet in the Black Sea takes another heavy blow, and the Ukrainian authorities are exultant. Why does Labour want to close down sweet shops? We'll hear why US candy stores are more trick than treat. Stuffed from floor to ceiling with extravagantly coloured sweets and breakfast cereals, alongside about 1 million different kinds of vapes and the odd bit of electrical junk. The United States has carried out what it called necessary and proportionate airstrikes in Iraq, raising fears the Israel-Hamas conflict could widen. We'll have the latest. And
one of the issues with Christmas pudding is that it is not as exciting when it's cold. So something that you could do would be cut a massive slab of it and then pan fry it in butter.
Chef Miguel Barclay talks us through tackling Christmas leftovers, and eaters beware, this involves butter and batter to make things better. The BBC News is read by Jane Steele.
Ukraine says it has destroyed a Russian landing ship in occupied Crimea. The Novokherkassk was hit by guided missiles during an overnight attack on the port city of Feodosia. Russian officials have confirmed the attack and said one person was killed and 2 others were wounded. Buildings were also reportedly damaged. Our correspondent in Kharkiv, James Waterhouse, says this is good news for Ukraine, but not a major strategic triumph.
This is a welcome bit of good news for Ukraine to be able to give against the backdrop of waning Western support. I think it'll do little to change the course of the fighting if we're talking in terms of Ukraine trying to liberate its territory and Russia trying to take as much as it can and keep hold of it. The Black Sea and Sea of Azov is strategically significant when we look at it through the lens of this war.
Israel has carried out fresh airstrikes in Gaza, saying it has hit more than 100 targets in the last 24 hours. Areas which the Israeli military had declared safe, such as Rafah in the south, were among those bombed. Meanwhile, the United States has attacked an Iranian-backed militant group in Iraq hours after American troops were injured in a drone strike. Here's our correspondent in Jerusalem, Shaima Khalil.
The U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the strikes had targeted 3 facilities used by Hezbollah and its affiliates, adding that there had been a series of attacks by the militias on U.S. bases in both Iraq and Syria. Mr. Austin stressed that the U.S. would not hesitate to protect its forces. There's been an escalation of activity by Hezbollah and other armed militias in the region since Israel began its military operation in Gaza, where there's no let-up in the bombardment. Tensions have risen on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. The Israeli government says its army is stepping up efforts against Hezbollah after the group fired rockets across the border.
French police have arrested a 33-year-old man on suspicion of murdering his wife and 4 children. The bodies of the 35-year-old woman and the children, aged between 9 months and 10 years, were found in a flat in Meaux near Paris. Officers said the suspect had a history of domestic violence complaints, but no criminal record. The Russian dissident Alexei Navalny has told supporters not to worry about him. In a series of tweets issued through his lawyer, Mr. Navalny insisted he was relieved to have reached the Siberian penal colony to which he's been transferred. He had temporarily disappeared from public view but was located by his lawyer on Monday, newly incarcerated at the site known as Polar Wolf. Here's Paul Moss.
This is an odd series of tweets. On the one hand, Alexei Navalny seems keen to reassure people he's doing okay, despite undergoing a 20-day journey through some of the coldest places in the world, to arrive at a penal colony that's considered tough even by Russian standards. He describes seeing beautiful, fluffy shepherd dogs and wearing a sheepskin coat with a fur hat. However, Mr. Navalny also says he isn't able to see past the prison's perimeter fence, and he mentions the lack of much daylight up north in the bitter Arctic winter.
Hundreds of homes in Surrey have been left without water or with low water pressure. Thames Water has apologised and says it has sent engineers to fix the issue, which is affecting Guildford and Godalming. The Conservative MP for the area, Jeremy Hunt, says he's asked the company to provide bottled water. The Japanese car maker Daihatsu says it is suspending operations at all 4 of its domestic manufacturing plants after a major safety scandal. The company has admitted that it's been manipulating the results of safety tests on almost all of its models for 3 decades. The factories will stop production until at least the end of January. Daihatsu has been making cars for more than a century. It produces nearly 1 million vehicles a year. Mickey Bristow reports.
Earlier this year, Daihatsu said only a few of its models were affected, but it's since admitted that it's been manipulating safety tests on 64 makes for 3 decades. That's nearly the whole of its vehicle lineup. It seems test results were falsified because of pressure to keep production rolling. This scandal has put in jeopardy Daihatsu's 9,000 domestic workers and thousands of suppliers. It could also hit the reputation of its parent company, Japan's biggest car manufacturer, Toyota.
The King's Christmas broadcast was the most watched programme on Christmas Day, with more than 7 million people tuning in. The Strictly Come Dancing Christmas special was second, ahead of Doctor Who. The figures from the broadcaster's Audience Research Board said the audience for the King's speech dropped by more than 3 million compared to his first speech as monarch last year. Boxing Day sales have got underway, with thousands of shoppers heading to the shops to make the most of big discounts. But some analysts have warned that trading could be disappointing both today and across the week. Here's our business correspondent Theo Leggett.
The Boxing Day sales were once a major event, eagerly awaited by bargain hunters, but they have lost some of their impact. That's largely because of pre-Christmas events such as Black Friday, as well as the availability of early discounts online. Some big chains, including Marks & Spencer and John Lewis, have remained shut today. However, the week after Christmas is still an opportunity for retailers to offload unsold stock to try to boost earnings after what early indications suggest was a disappointing run-up to the holiday. Shoppers are still expected to spend around £3.7 billion today, according to data from voucher codes, but that would be 3% less than last year.
A traditional rubber duck race in Gloucestershire has had its first international billing. Hundreds of people in Byberry Village watched 3,000 of the fake ducks float down the River Cone as usual. But this time, many more followed the race on a live stream. The event was to raise money for the local cricket club, and sponsors included families from America, Australia and New Zealand.
Thank you, Jane. From the commander of Ukraine's Air Force on social media this morning, these exultant words. The fleet in Russia is getting smaller and smaller thanks to the Air Force pilots and everyone involved. General Mykola Oleshchuk crowing over an early morning cruise missile assault on the Russian large landing ship Novocherkassk. Ukraine says it has destroyed the vessel. Russia this morning confirmed damage to one of its warships. Material posted on social media appeared to show a huge explosion, with soldiers witnessing the blast and scrambling to make sure that they were safe. How significant is the attack? Shashank Joshi is the defence editor at The Economist.
There's a military aspect and a political aspect, and the military aspect is, of course, that the Russians cannot reinforce the Black Sea fleet because the Turkish government controls the straits into the Black Sea. They have forbidden any replenishment of warships, and in 22 months of fighting, Ukraine, without any navy of its own, has succeeded in destroying, I think, around 7 large warships, at least 1 cruiser, most famously the Moskva last spring of 2022, 4 amphibious ships, a submarine, a supply ship, lots of patrol boats, landing craft. This is an extraordinary naval achievement. If you look at the ship that's just been taken out, the Novocherkassk, it's not a huge ship, but it's a really important amphibious landing ship. In the early part of the war, it's a kind of ship that would have been used for any landing on Odessa had the Russians attempted such a thing. And of course, the Black Sea Fleet poses a military threat to the Ukrainian coast. So by chipping away at it in this way, and by forcing it to move to more eastern port, that has effectively made Russia's life harder. So yeah, I think chipping away at the strength of the Black Sea Fleet has been a really significant naval achievement, and all the more so because the ground offensive has effectively failed on the Ukrainian side. So this is a way of gaining and keeping the initiative in the larger war, even if they don't have it on land.
It comes, as you say, in a wider context. Criticism of what is perceived to be as a failed counteroffensive. Much muttering about Vladimir Zelensky and his strategy and his politics, and of course the threat, because of delayed aid packages, support packages from both Europe and the US, of Ukraine entirely running out of munitions and military assistance. Does it change anything
I think that these kind of successes are very important for Ukraine in demonstrating a degree of success to its Western partners who may be feeling slightly fatalistic after the offensive. Obviously, the political mood, as you've covered for many weeks, is slightly grim for Ukraine, with the politics in America looking very harmful, very ominous. Politics in parts of Europe, certainly in the Netherlands, Slovakia, also turning against Ukraine. Events like this show that Russia does not have a foreordained victory in Ukraine, that it's not simply riding over all above it. And I think that's very, very important.
Shashank, whilst we've been speaking, the Russian Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu has issued a statement saying that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed and that Russia is moving forward on all fronts. Is that a fair reflection of the military reality on the ground in the east of Ukraine?
I think we'd call it technically true, but perhaps misleading. What Shoigu has claimed is that his troops have seized the town of Marinka. This is in eastern Ukraine. They have been pressing this area. It's outside Donetsk, and they've also separately been attacking a place called Avdiivka, which is also a very important battleground. And they've been making progress. They've been moving forward. The Ukrainians have been on the back foot. I think the catch, the caveat here to say, is that they have expended, the Russians, massive resources in taking this quite small amount of territory. Huge losses according to American intelligence figures, which I think are credible in this case. And they've made very little gains to show for it. So it's correct that they are on the front foot in that sense, but at huge cost. It's not necessarily sustainable, and I'm skeptical that the Russians will regain significant offensive potential at any point in the next several months.
A last word, if you would, on the need for the military packages from America and civilian assistance from Europe, respectively. How important are those for Ukraine to carry on the war?
They are hugely important. Your BBC colleagues have done some excellent reporting recently that highlighted how on parts of the front, the Ukrainians are firing one shell for every 10 the Russians are firing. That's an enormously important statistic. Just on shells alone, we are facing a significant imbalance that will be felt on the battlefield now and will get worse unless, particularly, the United States resolves its political problems with aid provision.
Shashank Joshi there, the defence editor of The Economist newspaper. For the first time, Ukraine celebrated Christmas on December the 25th this year. It separated itself from the Orthodox calendar, which sees celebrations in a few days' time, last year. We know this as the Carol of the Bells, but the original hails from Ukraine. Mixed into this year's viral video of the carol, images of the devastation 22 months of war have brought. That devastation, financial, military, the nation's infrastructure, the fabric of its society, continues to climb. Many millions of Ukrainians have now spent almost 2 years away from home, either in exile beyond the country's border or internally displaced within, or both. Dasha, who is a 15-year-old girl, grew up in Kurakhov in the Donetsk region in the east. She's been on the move since the war began. I asked her how Christmas was for her.
It was very good. My Christmas was in a camp. We've got a lot of presents, a lot of sweets. We ate everything. We had a good time. And I will be heading home soon.
How long now have you been travelling around? And when you do get to stay somewhere, how long have you been staying in one place?
I've been moving from place to place for about 2 years now. First, after the war started, we moved to Poland. But to be honest, Polish people are not particularly friendly to Ukrainians. So we spent there about 5 months and we had to move back to Ukraine. My auntie lives in Vinnytsia region, so we stayed with her for about a month. Then we went to Dnipro. We stayed there about 5 months, but then we almost ran out of money, and then we had to come back to Vinnytsia, and we hope to celebrate New Year here as well.
What is the hardest part of all the travel and the uncertainty? What is the most difficult thing that comes to your mind?
We have to change places all the time. You need to settle in a new place to find new friends, which is not always very easy. I'm into dancing a lot, so it's not very easy for me to find a new dancing group, for example.
How hard has it been on your education? Because I know this is a very important time for schooling.
I went to physical school only in Poland for 2 months, and then summer holidays started. Otherwise, I'm attending school remotely. To be honest, I cannot understand everything 100% just because it's all online. But at the moment, at this very moment, I'm at school in the camp, so it's much better.
What about friends and friendships? Are you able to make new friends? Are you able to stay in touch with old friends?
It's very difficult to keep in touch, to be honest, because from where I am, everyone moved all over the place. I met some new good friends in Poland, but again, it's very difficult to keep in touch. To be honest, the only person I really keep in touch constantly is my childhood friend. Here in the camp, I met a lot of new friends, and I'm so happy now. And it would be pity to leave, because when I'm back home, we cannot. It won't be the same. Of course, we will keep in touch, but I'm very happy now where I am.
What sort of future do you see for yourself, and when do you think it might come about? Does it feel more like a dream? What sort of future do you think about?
It's difficult to predict future. I see myself in the future as a choreographer, but probably it won't happen in Ukraine. I can't see myself being choreographer in Ukraine, to be honest.
Well, that was Dasha, 15-year-old girl. Andrzej Stawnica is one of Ukraine's most prominent businessmen and the founder of the Superhumans Centre, which looks after veterans who've lost their limbs during the war.
We're blessed to have people like this. They have extremely high spirit. They are fighting for their land, and these are people with very high motivation, even though they lost 1, 2, or even 3 or 4 limbs sometimes. They're real fighters, fighting to get their life back, to get their opportunity back, to go back to work, to hold their children with their hands, bionic hands or normal hands, doesn't matter, but they're extremely highly motivated.
This is a war of such scale and now such length of time. You must have spent time thinking about how, in particular, military veterans are going to live and thrive in the Ukraine of future years and decades.
We should learn from the past, and we should make our judgments, and we should definitely take care of these people. We're working on finding them jobs. We're working them on socially integrating them into the society, and the state, unfortunately, is not right now doing this because they're busy with the war. That's kind of obvious.
How much of a gap do you think there is between those who've been directly affected by war, a very sizable number, of course, but still the large majority of Ukrainians who've not been directly affected by it in the way that the people that you've been helping have been?
The people who fought in combat and the people who stayed, there is an enormous feeling of guilt by the people who stayed. And the people who fought, when they come back, they're asking, like, what have we been fighting for? We need to find common ground for them. It's going to be a massive social dilemma. So right now, during wartime, the attention is sort of distracted at the east of the country and the war and weapons, etc. But once everything is over, this will be the number one question in the society, for sure.
Presumably, Andrzej, you know people who have left the country and made lives of some shape or form abroad. Is there a challenge about the relationship between those who have left and those who stayed as well?
the amount of people who left is too big, and I dream of them coming back, but we need to create conditions for them to come back.
Do you worry they won't come back, Andre? Do you worry they won't come back?
Some of them won't come back, especially women with kids. They get reintegrated every year more and more, especially after year 3. So according to social studies, year 3 is sort of a breakdown point when people make up their mind. Unfortunately, I expect a lot of them to find new lives in EU. Of course, EU will stimulate them to come back.
We hear a lot in these last few months about political division, or at least the restarting of political debate in a way perhaps there hasn't been for the last year and a half. Do you get that sense that domestic politics is on the move again, or does it feel very much still like a war-gripped economy, polity and society?
Human being turns out to be extremely adaptable. So, you get used to everything. At the same time, unfortunately, no major breakthroughs on the front. And the whole struggle with the Western help and money and weapons, especially the long-range missiles, doesn't give people the needed distraction, the needed focus, so they turn into internal problems, internal politics. I hope this will change with the counteroffensive hopefully going back on track and new weapons coming. But I think this is a byproduct of negative news in the recent months.
You've obviously thought a lot about how the people of your country have changed. Have you thought much about how you have changed over the year and a half, more than a year and a half of the war?
Yeah, I'm a totally another person right now. War is such a strong emotion. It wipes out. It looks like I never lived a life before. It looks like it's a completely fresh start for me, and I cannot think of my previous life. One day is good enough. No more planning. There is even a joke that people who buy hard avocado fascinate me because you don't do planning. You live one day after another.
Anthony Stevens. Coming up.
Essentially, this is very much a living collection. We hold the national collection of heritage vegetable varieties, and every seed has got a shelf life. So we need this continuous process of regenerating the seed.
The lending library for heritage seeds. We will explain. Do get in touch with us on social media. Use the hashtag BBCWATA. Our email address is world@1@bbc.co.uk. Since when were sweets called candy? You might have wondered if you passed a garishly lit US candy store on a high street near you. Many of these have clustered in places like London's Oxford Street, the nation's high street as it calls itself, and there's a fair bit of controversy around them, largely because they've been known to go without paying the business rates they owe to local councils, but also because their deeply opaque ownership structure suggests, to some at least, criminal endeavour. I popped out this morning to find some. Oxford Street is buzzing right now with people overburdened with both time and cash and looking to spend both. There was a time when there were around 30 different US candy stores on Oxford Street. They sprung up during the pandemic. There's been something of a crackdown since then, but still a fair number hold on. One I'm outside is stuffed from floor to ceiling with incredibly garishly coloured sweets and breakfast cereals, alongside about 1 billion different kinds of vapes and bits and bobs of electronic goods as well. The question behind loads of this is how shops like this make enough money, make enough margin on what they're selling to pay their rent, to pay their business rates, to pay their staff, to pay their power costs as well. A lot of the established stores really don't like these shops. They think they bring the whole area down, and that's why there's been controversy over these spots of extravagant colour in the midst of high streets up and down the land. Well, the Labour Party says it would curb the rise of these stores if it is elected. James Murray is the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Good afternoon, Mr. Murray.
Hi, good afternoon.
Is this a policy in search of a problem?
I think it's a problem that people see in high streets across the country as people are going out shopping over the next few days. Many people will notice this rise in these dodgy American-themed candy stores on many of our high streets. And we know that they are ripping off the taxpayer. too, because of the business rates that aren't being paid. And that's why we're calling for two things. Firstly, for the government to work with councils like Westminster to go after these shops which are set up on high streets across the country by incentivising instead legitimate businesses to set up shop instead. And secondly, we're calling on the government to use powers in the Economic Crime Act to make sure that they're cracking down on the shell companies which are often behind many of these outfits.
You speak of incentivising legitimate businesses to take up places on high streets instead. The very strong suggestion is then that these are illegitimate businesses. Are you able to sort of track their structure and their ownership such that you can say, look, these are set up as concerns designed to rip off either local councils or the people that they may or may not be paying rent to, etc., etc.?
Well, what we know for sure is that business rates are unpaid by many of these shops which have been set up. We know that in Westminster, for instance, they're pursuing around £8 million worth of debts from 21 different candy stores. So they're not paying the business rates bills that they owe and that many other businesses along high streets across the country do pay. What we also know is that when councils are trying to pursue those unpaid business rates debts, they bump up against these shell companies which are set up without proper directors, without proper checks in place, and actually that means that it's very difficult or impossible for councils to get back the money that we as taxpayers are owed. So that's why we're calling on the government to use powers that are already in law in the Economic Crime Act to strengthen the ID requirements, put proper checks in place to make it much harder to set up dodgy companies which are behind many of these shops.
Just to clarify, you're not actually talking about any new laws or new regulations, are you? You think the powers are already in place but just not being used effectively enough?
That's right. So in the Economic Crime Act, there are powers which are delegated to the Secretary of State already there for the government to make use of, and that would strengthen the ID requirements when setting up new companies, which would really crack down on the shell companies, which are so often behind these dodgy candy stores. I mean, that sits alongside what we're calling for the other part of our proposal, which is to get the government to work with councils, including through a pilot in Westminster, to redirect some of the money which is currently spent on empty property relief towards supporting new legitimate shops when they set up business on our high streets.
Do you not worry that you are a little Canute-like trying to reinvigorate the high street when so many people either head online or head to big retail parks to make their purchases?
Well, I think when I talk to people, in my constituency or when I'm out and about across the country, people recognise the real importance of high streets, not just as places to go shopping, but also as centres for our social life in local communities. People want high streets to be protected and supported, and that's why, beyond what we're setting out today, if we were elected in an election next year, we would set out to replace the current system of business rates with a new system to support our high streets and to make sure they can thrive again.
James Murray, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the World at One. James Murray, the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury there. Ever since Israel was attacked on October the 7th and it responded in Gaza, one of the great concerns has been the spread of war around the region. Overnight, America attacked the facilities of Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. In retaliation, it said, for attacks on US bases in Iraq and in Syria. The military action came as the death was announced outside Damascus of a senior figure in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Brigadier General Syed Razi Mousavi. And this morning, the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant gave a pretty broad hint that Israel was militarily active across the region.
We are in a multi-front war and are coming under attack from 7 different theatres. Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Judea and Samaria, Iraq, Yemen and Iran. We have already responded and taken action in 6 of these theatres. And I say here in the most explicit way, anyone who acts against us is a potential target. There is no immunity for anyone.
Judea and Samaria, of course, the phrase used by some on the nationalist and religious right in Israel for what's commonly known as the West Bank, occupied Palestinian territories. Shaima Khalil is our correspondent in Jerusalem. Shaima, good afternoon. Can I start you on those comments from Yoav Gallant, from the Defence Minister? A lot of what he said, a lot of the places he mentioned there are either Iran or Iran-supported militia or governments.
That's right, and it's a pretty comprehensive list, isn't it? You know, he mentions Gaza in the beginning first, and then he refers to Lebanon, West Bank, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and then the country itself, Iran. And while there are no active wars in each of the places that he mentions, these are certainly very volatile areas that have been made more volatile, more tense as the war in Gaza began. Yoav Gallant was speaking from Israel's northern borders with Lebanon because action there has tensed up. There has been exchange of fire between the Israeli army and Hezbollah militias. We understand from the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, in a statement that an anti-tank missile was launched from inside Lebanon earlier today, and Mr. Gallant himself says that the Israeli army had received fire and had retaliated. He said that we're hitting Hezbollah very hard. They have about 150 dead, and they have been pushed quite close to the fence. I think the comment that he made that really stood out to me was he said Hezbollah looks at what's happening in Gaza, understands very well that what we did in Gaza can also be done in Beirut. It's a chilling prospect when you think about that. It's a chilling prospect because you only have to go back to what happened in 2006, that month-long war between Israel and Hezbollah with its devastating effect. And I think everyone hears this and watches with concern, because I don't think anybody, as the Prime Minister says, that the war in Gaza is going to be long, it's not going to end anytime soon. Opening another front on the northern border is just not something that either Israel or its allies want, to be specific.
But currently, I mean, presumably Israel sees its best defence as being extraordinarily robust on its borders and, if necessary, beyond its borders.
Indeed, because its borders have been very active. We're not just talking about Gaza. Again, its northern borders have been very active, and I think it wants to send a message that it will respond. But I think also with the Hezbollah military capabilities, if anything, if a miscalculation happens, you could be looking at a very long and protracted conflict on that border, which neither Israel nor Lebanon nor the US indeed wants to see.
Shaina, thank you so much. Shaina Khalil, our correspondent in Jerusalem. Many green-fingered listeners will know about seed banks, but seed libraries, yes, lending libraries for seeds, may be something new. The charity Garden Organic is currently recruiting an army of seed guardians to grow and preserve historic vegetable varieties to help protect biodiversity and make sure they don't go out of existence. Hundreds of volunteer gardeners are taking part in the scheme, stretching from Scotland to Kent. I spoke to Katrina Fenton, head of the Heritage Seed Library, and Marie Dukenny, a seed guardian, and I started by asking Marie about her involvement with the project.
I get seeds from the Heritage Seed Library. It's like a lending library, like books, but there's seeds instead. And so you get some seeds and you grow them on and you send the seeds back to the Heritage Seed Library. They save them and they circulate them to other growers and just keep those varieties, those seeds in circulation.
And so you grow them to full vegetables, do you? And then extract the seeds?
That's right. Extract the seeds, dry them, prepare them, and send them all back, and do a sort of report on any problems, how things went, so that they have a record of how a particular variety might perform in different parts of the country.
Katrina, can you clear up a little bit of confusion for me? If you have the seeds in the library already, why do you need to send them out, grow them to vegetables, and then get the seeds sent back to you?
Essentially, this is very much a living collection. We hold the national collection of heritage vegetable varieties, and every seed has got a shelf life. So we need this continuous process of regenerating the seed, ensuring that all of these precious heritage varieties that might not otherwise exist are kept going from one generation of seed to the next.
Marie, what prompted you to get involved? What was the pull for you?
We've always been interested in growing organically. You don't want to put something in your mouth that's going to poison you. And when we lived in the Midlands, we lived not far away from Ryton, which is the home of Garden Organic. And so we used to visit the gardens, which were absolutely inspiring, and see their trial plots and also the Heritage Seed Library. So we became very much inspired and very committed to what they were doing and wanted to support them.
Katrina, are there winners and losers in the seed library world? Are there vegetable varieties you've saved, others that you've been, as far as you know, unable to?
The collection is very dynamic. We're always bringing potential new varieties into the library, so that can often be quite a tenuous process. So this year we're trying to grow out some sort of 30-plus-year-old cabbage seed, an old ex-commercial German variety that we want to bring back into use. But it's taken us quite a lot of perseverance to get the number of plants we need.
Marie, I hate to ask a vulgar question, but do you get to eat them at all?
It depends what you're growing. if I'm growing peas, obviously I send them all back because I've got enough peas of my own. And if there is a variety that I grew for the Heritage Seed Library, which was absolutely fantastic, really delicious peas. And so I saved a half a dozen of those seeds, kept back for myself, and sent them all the rest. And I've replanted those, so now I've built up a stock for myself.
Are there particular vegetables that you have to work particularly hard at? You mentioned the cabbage, I think you were talking about. What kind of effort do you have to make to bring that up again after it's lain, well, rather dormant for a few decades?
Some crops are generally quite tricky to grow for seed, and that's reflected in the collection that we have. So we have lots of peas, and we have lots of French beans, because generally they're quite easy to save seed from. But there are some tricky vegetable varieties to grow, either because the seed, when we receive it, is quite old or quite fragile or very small quantity, or because they're quite hard to grow. We depend on people like Marie and other seed guardians to grow perhaps some of the less fussy crops for us, but certainly ones that we need help with in order to replace that key core library sample to ensure that this living collection continues for future generations.
Katrina Fenton and Marie Duquesne, seed mistresses. 2024 will be a groaning smorgasbord of democracy. More than 2 billion possible voters in more than 50 elections, from South Africa to the European Parliament, Mexico to, yes, this blessed plot, the United Kingdom. Over the week we're going to look at 4 contests, starting with the big one, India, the world's most populous democracy. After nearly a decade in power, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP party look set to continue a winning streak despite controversy over an increasingly hostile atmosphere for India's Muslims. Our South Asia correspondent Samira Hussain reports.
Almost a decade in power, and India's Prime Minister's popularity has not diminished. Earlier this month, there were elections in 5 states, the last set of polling before the general election next year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP party may have lost Telangana in the south and Mizoram in the northeast, but it pulled off a hat trick, handedly winning Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh.
I was surprised at the sweep. I was also surprised that the BJP won all the 3 states in the Hindi heartland.
Neerja Chaudhary is a contributing editor to the Indian Express, a leading English-language daily newspaper.
I thought they might win 1, maybe even 2 closely, but not all 3. I think it means that it is almost a done deal for the BJP that's led by Narendra Modi, because it seems that at the end of 10 years, his popularity remains undimmed.
The way people vote in state elections does not always mirror what will happen federally. But history has shown that the BJP can lose regional elections and still win general elections decisively. The party's success largely lies in its charismatic leader and its nationalist agenda, promoting Hinduism as part of the country's national identity. But India also lacks a political party that can counter Mr. Modi's might.
Rahul Gandhi Jindabad! Rahul Gandhi Jindabad!
Congress is the main opposition party, led by Rahul Gandhi. It ruled India for more than half a century, but it hasn't been able to recover from its 2014 electoral defeat.
एक सरकार होती है जो गरीबों को, किसानों को,
on the campaign trail, Gandhi says that he is the kind of leader that will fight for the poor, farmers, and day laborers. It presents itself as a party for all Indians. But Congress hasn't been able to deliver a clear message to voters on what the party stands for.
the opposition needs to get its narrative right, a narrative that appeals to people. Mr. Modi commands the trust of the electorate. People said he will somehow manage to run India, rule India. Now that is not a sense of confidence they have about the opposition. So I think they need to go back to the drawing board and face these questions squarely. How do they counter the leadership of Mr. Modi? They need to get their act together because India needs a strong opposition for our democracy to continue to be vibrant.
But under the Modi government, there has been an erosion of democratic institutions. Human rights groups say violations have increased and press freedoms have diminished. It's an alarming path for the world's largest democracy. But Mr. Modi and his BJP party remain extremely popular and are poised to win its third general election.
Samira Hussain reporting, and tomorrow we'll have our political editor Chris Mason on the forthcoming festivities when the election comes here in Britain. It's the time of year for some when opening the fridge requires some bizarre form of bravery. Lurking within is an offensive amount of food, but somehow you appear to eat most of it relatively decently. How then to deliver your fridge from the dry, tasteless turkey, the day-old pudding, the roast potatoes that looked so good only 24 hours ago? The World at One is here to help. I asked chef and cookbook writer Miguel Barkley, first of all, how to tackle the doer beast that is leftover turkey.
The classic option, the thing that everyone's doing, is the curry. So turkey curry, really easy. Fry up some onions, chuck in everything you've got, a little bit of curry powder, maybe some chopped tomatoes, something like that. If you want to go down the sort of chicken tikka masala-y sort of vibe, you can put some ground almond in there, or a little splash of cream. But everyone knows how to do a curry. That's the easy one. But what I like to do is a giant Yorkshire pudding. So that is something that people aren't doing at home. Oh. So it's basically a toad in the hole. You get big chunks of turkey, you chuck them in, you get your pigs in blankets, you get your roast potatoes, you get your parsnips. So you know when you cut your parsnips really long, they're sort of sausagey sort of shape. And if you cut your carrots long, they're sort of sausagey shape. They look amazing in a toad in the hole.
There will be listeners thinking roast potatoes and batter is an interesting combination.
Oh, that's the dream. I'm a double carb fiend.
So what if you don't like curry and you balk at the idea of roast potatoes in batter? Any other options for the turkey?
Yeah, something that is actually very tasty and it doesn't feel like you're eating leftovers would be like a sort of tacos, fajitas, that sort of vibe. Okay. Again, you're sort of masking the flavour or you're enhancing the flavour a little bit with a bit of cumin, a bit of paprika, something like that.
Roast potatoes, you have suggested, quite controversially, putting them in batter as part of a sort of magic toad in the hole. Anything else that you can do with roast potatoes, which are perhaps the commonest leftover bar the beast itself?
Everyone's doing like bubble and squeak and stuff like that. So we all know how to do bubble and squeak. But if you want to like elevate it a little bit, we're looking at stuff like essentially what you do with a fish cake. So we're going to mash the potato a bit. We're going to get one of those fancy egg rings. We're going to make it an inch or 2 inches thick. It's going to be majestic. If you want, you can breadcrumb it. You put a little bit of flour, then a bit of egg, then some breadcrumbs, and then you're going to either pan fry it or put it in the oven. Like that is a centerpiece. You can have it with salad. Absolutely amazing. It's going to have all those flavours in there. If you're not really that into the Christmas flavour the day after, and you want something a little bit similar, go down the Thai fish cake. Bind it all together with an egg. Put a dollop of some sort of spice mix in there. I mean, these are things that don't immediately spring to mind. And if you're really bored of the Christmas flavours, it's something new, something exciting. Get the taste buds revved up.
Let us move towards the last course, because last Christmas, no one ate the Christmas pudding that I cooked, largely because they were so full of other food, and there was an enormous amount of it left, and there's only so much that one lonely individual can eat in the days after Christmas. Is there anything that can be done with that sad half-Christmas pudding sitting in the back of the fridge under tinfoil.
One of the issues with Christmas pudding is that it is not as exciting when it's cold. So something that you could do would be cut a massive slab of it and then pan fry it in butter, and then you get the saltiness of the butter and the richness of the butter and the decadence of having it pan fried.
This is firmly in the kind of my diet starts next year.
No, yeah, the diet starts on the 1st of Jan, so you've got this window where you can do whatever you want guilt-free. So take advantage of it and do something that's exciting.
Miguel Barclay, the heavyweight chef. PM is at 5. This is Johnny Diamond, and that is The World at 1:45.
Studio direction was by Rob Farmer. The editor was Rebecca Keating. Now on Radio 4, mythical creatures. Fantasy writer Rhianna Pratchett is on the lookout for a particularly large creature.
One day I was visiting my grandparents in Cliro, Wales. It was a grey day, and as I looked out of the window over cloud-strewn hills and valleys, I saw a patch of sunlight shining down on the furthest hills. That's where the giants sleep, my grandmother told me. The sun's keeping them warm. I kept a careful eye on the hills from then on, just in case one of the giants should wake with a craving for a child-based snack. I'm Rhianna Pratchett, and I'm on a quest to seek out mythical creatures across the British Isles and discover what they tell us about our world and our lives, past and present. Today we explore the land of giants. I've returned to the Welsh mountains and to Cadair Idris, a striking 890-metre mountain, to meet a special giant.
Amser o, roedd Cadair Idris yn byw there y mynydd. A giant, Idris, lived on top of this mountain, where he sat in his chair, Cadair, or maybe his castle, the Caer, staring at the stars and the moon. One day he got some pebbles in his shoes, so he shook them out, and they are the giant boulders you see up there today. And he threw one of them off the mountain, and that's the standing stone on the old track to Trowsville. That's how big he was. From his stone observatory on top of the mountain, on a clear day like this, he could see the whole wide world. Well, maybe not all of it, but Ceredigion to the south, Shropshire to the east, Eryri to the north, the Wicklow Hills to the west, along with two mythical lands in Cardigan Bay, the submerged city of Cantregaelod and the utopian land of Plant Rhys Ddyfn. Though the mountain is usually shrouded in mist, if you use your imagination when you're up there, you'll see a giant, 3 counties, a prince's castle, a submerged land, and a forgotten utopia. And maybe that's why, if you spend the night on the mountain, you'll come down in the morning, mad, dead, or a poet.
When you stand looking up at the huge expanse of this mountain, Cadair Idris, the sheer scale of it makes you feel, well, tiny. The bowl shape at the top, now filled with a blue lake, really does look like the perfect spot for a giant to sit. You can well understand how this hulking landscape inspired such an evocative story. I met with storyteller and folklorist Peter Stevenson as I tried to find out who was Idris.
I think he was many things to many different people. The folkloric view of him is that he was like a scientist. He used to go up there and watch the heavens, watch the movement of the stars. Hence, they say Cadair Idris, Cadair is chair in Welsh.
One of the details of the story I particularly like is the idea that if you go and spend a night on the mountain, you either come down dead, I assume someone brings you down if you die, or you get eaten by the wildlife, or mad, or a poet. Do you know where this particular detail came about?
If you understand the wit and the humour of people around here, it would make complete sense. It's one of these things where you can't separate the story from the people who tell. And to me, that mad, dead, or a poet. I mean, when people tell that around here, everyone laughs. Why would you go trampling up that mountain, for heaven's sake, when you can sit down here and have a cup of tea? You must be mad or a poet to do that. It's that idea.
Ever thought of spending a night yourself?
This may explain a lot, but I have done.
Well, I'm very glad you made it down again.
It's like a challenge, isn't it? All these folk tales, I have to test them.
So if giant stories tell us something about the people who tell them, what do giants tell us about the places they're said to live? I was joined in the shadow of the mountain by Erin Kavanagh, a geomythologist who explores the connection between stories and geological features and events.
Here at Cadair Idris, we have a mountain that some people say is the body of a giant who lay down to watch the stars and fell asleep. Other people say that it's where he sat and was watching the stars, and that's how the geological crater formed that we now know as the Cadair, the chair of Idris. So there you have an immediate connection between a story of a giant and a natural landscape.
I do like the idea that he had his own chair for his astronomy work. Dr. Mary Bateman specialises in medieval literature at the University of Bristol.
There's a large stone called Llech Idris in Tresfynydd that is supposed to have been picked out from Idris's shoe and sort of was bothering him, presumably while he was sat on top of this mountain thinking and looking at the stars. That is really, really common, and actually a lot of the giant folklore that you see, not just in Wales but across Britain really, it is very much about explaining unusual things in the landscape, be they ancient ruins, earthworks, striking topographies, mountains, hills, etc. It's about looking at them and finding an explanation for them in something that is human and comprehensible. And in that respect, giants are almost like a way of being able to mediate between the human and the landscape, a way for human beings to try and understand the landscape.
Giant stories in particular, they have a real relevance to me. There's so much a part of this landscape, you could feel them being human, particularly in Wales and certainly in this kind of area. There's something very close between the landscape and the people. I knew people when I was younger who felt that elements of the landscape, a mountain or a stream running through their land, was on a par, was an equal. They were to be treated in the same way as you would treat somebody you love, someone in your family. It's almost as if they were part of the family.
I feel I've definitely come to the right place to explore giants. Storyteller Peter Stevenson tells me many mountains in Wales have giants, maybe even more than one.
My childhood was spent in a place called Trecairi, which is further north. Trecairi means giant's town. On top of the mountain there were 150 Iron Age roundhouses. There were people living up there, whether they were giants because they were clever enough to keep out of trouble and keep out of the way of invading armies, or whether they really were big. I like the idea that there were these very clever people out there who knew how to survive, who knew how to live in this landscape.
The term giant doesn't necessarily mean somebody or something that's super tall. It can mean that they are kingly or important in some way. You know, they're great in status as well as stature. And that has an appeal. They're celebrities in folklore.
The celebrities of folklore, I love that idea. Everyone needs their heroes. But many giants, unlike Idris, aren't ones we particularly like to meet.
What I find interesting about Idris in particular is we often think of giants as destructive creatures, but Idris is a philosopher, a thinker, an astronomer. He's less fee-fi-fo farm and more fee-fi-fo. Why do you think that is? It's so beautiful to have this kind of difference in giant tales.
You do get this split within the giant stories. You do get the BFGs, the nice, friendly ones, and Idris is unquestionably one of those. Against that, of course, you do get the ones that go around causing real trouble. Along the coast here, you get stories of battles between the coastal dwellers and the mountain dwellers, and the mountain dwellers are always giants.
You've got like Jack the Giant Killer, where Jack kills some terrifying man-eating giants with names like Thunderdell and Blunderbore, kind of like the baddies in the BFG. You've got Rita Gower in the Welsh tradition, a giant who makes a cloak out of the beards of human kings who he has beaten. So there are certainly very frightening giants in folklore.
As cloaks go, that's got to itch. I don't think I'll be taking any fashion tips from Rita. This beastly brute giant figure, though, is certainly pervasive. Erin Kavanagh.
This idea of a giant as aggressive comes from the Greek, where we get gigantis, the word giant, from. And there they were supreme warriors, deeply aggressive. These were the armies. And so that has stayed in our consciousness in the West because we're so heavily influenced by Greek literature and Greek thinking. And that gives us our aggressive element to our giants. Friendly giants are few and far between. We have them here in Wales.
Yes, let's hear more about the friendly giants.
There's a lovely one from down near Milford Haven, a giant who was called to clean up the water after two sea serpents were fighting, and he came and just cleaned up Milford Haven, which has such a relevance today because of the oil pollution in the haven.
They can be lovers. There's a story of a tragic love triangle between three giants from the Bristol area. This complicated story essentially is used to explain islands in the Severn Estuary. It's said to be the body of the losing giant in this love triangle.
When you go down to Cornwall, you have lots of arguing married giants having squabbles over different coloured rocks that create the landscape.
Giants, presumably when they're not falling out with each other, have been credited with some impressive construction projects, like Belle and her husband Wade in the North York Moors, who are linked to the building of an ancient road and a couple of castles, though not all giants are quite as good with DIY.
There's stories of giants trying to build and throwing tools, hammers or keys to each other across hills and then dropping them. So there's almost a way in which some of these giants are quite flawed and quite human, which is not necessarily what you would expect. But by making humanity and the everyday drudgery and our flaws large like that, it's a way of raising human existence above the everyday and making it seem like something bigger, something more universal and lasting. Kind of a way of understanding ourselves.
A very human thing to do is to ask big philosophical questions, like Idris did.
People like to think about existence and their place within the world and the future and the past, and that's why Idris, the stargazing giant, has such longevity, I think, as a figure, because we identify with him.
Why do you think we still want to tell giant stories in modern times?
What people have been doing is combining an empirical understanding of the environment with an imaginative one. That's how humanity engages. That's how we engage with ourselves, with other people, with the world around us. Through stories, through narrative.
That pulling together of mythology and the reality. It starts to open up another way of looking at the world. You find giants like Stoma Oddi in Milford Haven or Idris here, who just have a real relevance to us today about how we should be leading our lives. Because that's the whole point about these stories. They're from the past, told in the present, but they're helping us to move forward into the future. And it's very much to do with the fact that they are personifications of the landscape. You know, if you treat them well, you're treating the landscape well, and they will help you.
We're living in a time now, where things are increasingly virtual and global. We're often living our lives very much online. We're even working from home now a lot of the time, so even our work life is all very plugged into something that is virtual. And the thing about giant folklore in the landscape is that it is something that plugs us into a sense of place that we might be feeling like we're missing in the world that we live in now.
So giants connect us to the land, and the land connects us to giants. So tread carefully next time you go hill walking, lest you wake a sleeping one from their slumber. Next time, we head to the seashore to meet the Selkie. To hear all episodes of Mythical Creatures, visit BBC Sounds now.
Mythical Creatures was presented by Rhianna Pratchett and is a 7 digital production for BBC Radio 4. There's a crisis at the vets and it's all systems go for Lily. It's Christmas Day in Ambridge coming up after the news here on BBC Radio 4.
On BBC iPlayer.
I was in this journey night back, searching for answers.
Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up and realise you've no idea where you've been?
Now I'm back in Ireland. Places should be full of happy memories.
Some things are best left buried.
What did I do?
Wherever he is, I think that he's in trouble.
We will find your man, okay?
There's something that I want, something I've been looking for.
Home is where the hurt is.
Maybe it's time you find out who you really are.
The new series of The Tourist. Watch all episodes from New Year's Day on BBC iPlayer.
BBC News at 2 o'clock. Iraq has called a number of US airstrikes carried out against targets in the country a hostile act. President Biden authorised the attacks in response to a drone strike on an airbase near Erbil yesterday. The Pentagon said it was hitting facilities used by militia groups backed by Iran. Russia has acknowledged that one of its Navy ships was hit by a Ukrainian cruise missile while docked in Crimea. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defence published a photograph which appears to show the Novokherkassk on fire and badly damaged. It's the latest in a series of successful attacks by Ukraine. Dr. Patrick Bury is a defence and security expert at the University of Bath and former NATO analyst.
If you look at the geography of Marinka, it's a stretched town running along the N5 road east to west, and so it could actually be the case where the Russians control most of it, but the Ukrainians are still able to control the western part, or at least bring it under fire, so both sides could claim that they'd taken it or it hadn't been taken. Certainly the footage coming from it is absolute devastation. I mean, this is World War I level, complete obliteration, which shows you the level of combat, the intensity that's going on there.
Some retailers, including Marks & Spencer and Next, have kept their doors closed for the Boxing Day sales. Footfall on Europe's busiest shopping street, Oxford Street, picked up after a quiet start, but shoppers said it still felt quieter. The Japanese car maker Daihatsu says it will suspend operations at its domestic plants after admitting manipulating safety test results for 3 decades. The factories will stop work until at least the end of January. Christmas Day viewing figures have shown the King's Christmas message dominated the airwaves again, with more than 7 million people tuning in to watch. The Strictly Come Dancing Christmas special was second, ahead of Doctor Who. The first ever edition of the Bruins Annual has been acquired by the National Library of Scotland. Curators at the library have been searching for the 1939 first edition for at least a decade and finally spotted it on a bookseller's website. BBC News.
Bill Nye stars in our comedy drama in Quarter of an Hour, where 3 lonely people connect through comedy. Single act is at 2:15. But first on Radio 4, it's The Archers, and it's Christmas morning at the stables, where Paul is on a mission.
Okay, how are we doing?
I'm nearly done peeling potatoes and I'm doing the carrots next.
Great. Mum?
Still doing sprouts?
Okay, I'm going to check the turkey in a sec.
Has everyone in there got a drink?
Yeah.
And they're getting on okay?
Yeah, they're fine, I think. That's going on about cycling.
Honestly?
And Freddie's going on about meat.
Oh, he's not.
Not again?
Yeah, it's a bit weird. Should I get them started?
And Elizabeth is just stuck in the middle between the two of them.
Shall I go and rescue your mum? You have to finish the sprouts.
I think my mum's fine. John was just showing her photos from his cycling trip to the Pyrenees, and I'm sure she really loves that bit of France, so, you know.
Okay.
Oh, turkey's looking good.
Oh, is that your phone, Paul?
Yeah. It's Josh.
I bet he's regretting jumping ship.
Oh, no.
What? What's he saying?
Brookfield has lost its cooker.
Lost its cooker?
It's not working, and they're asking if they can come here and finish off their cooking.
You're joking.
No, I'm not. The oven at Rickyard's too small, apparently.
Oh, what a nightmare for them.
Well, they can't. There's no room. Can't they go to the pub? Do they want to eat here as well?
I mean, if we shifted lunch by a couple of hours, we could get all of our prep finished so they could do theirs.
And then there's enough room in the oven for their beef if we move things around.
Okay,
But do they want to eat here? Because there's loads of them.
He doesn't say. Well, I think they'd have to. They couldn't possibly cart all their lunch back to Brookfield. We could make it work, couldn't we?
might actually be quite fun.
Maybe.
Okay, now Josh is ringing me. What do I say? What do I say?
Say yes.
Really?
Well, we can't say no, can we? Not in their hour of need. It is Christmas after all. We'll just make it work.
How?
Well, I've actually no idea.
Okay. Hi, Josh. Look at Martha's face.
Yeah.
She loves him already.
Chris.
But she does.
I can see.
It's a lovely pony, don't you think?
Beautiful.
I love his name.
It's a great name.
Have you ever seen it?
What?
Champion, the Wonder Horse.
I'm not sure.
Well, it's this really old American TV show, black and white. 50s or 60s. Yeah?
I'm kind of a bit shell-shocked.
Shell-shocked?
A pony is a massive present.
I know. Yeah, I know.
What? I just thought you would have maybe talked to me first.
I wanted it to be a surprise.
For me as well?
Why not?
Because it's a massive present.
I thought you'd be pleased.
Did you?
Of course.
I don't believe you.
You don't believe me?
I don't. I think you wanted to, but I don't know what you wanted to do. Outdo me. Impress me. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here.
All I can say is I'm glad we've gone ahead with the turkey.
I am so sorry about this.
Stop apologising, Ruth. It's all good fun. It's great.
It is. Oh, I feel like I'm in one of those reality TV shows where two families have to live together in one room for a year.
Oh, don't say that.
Why not?
But you're going to make Ruth feel worse.
Oh, it's fine.
Sorry, Ruth.
Glass of fizz, Denise?
I might just hang on until things are a bit less crazy.
Fair enough.
How's the gravy coming on?
Good, I think.
It smells amazing.
Drink, Ruth?
Definitely, please. Out there.
Yeah, okay. David and Joy are laying the table.
What about Jill and Stella?
They're both drinking sherry and doing a Christmas crossword with Ben.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound too controversial.
And Leonard and John are talking about the best way to fix a bicycle chain.
Of course they are.
How's the stuffing?
Yes, looking good, I think.
Is that enough?
Well, it's too late now to make more.
Oh, there's no room left for any more of anything anyway.
We've got so much food, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh, Paul, your phone's ringing again.
It better not be anyone else with a broken cooker. Oh, it's Alistair. Hey, Alistair, you okay? Oh, no. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I don't think I can, because I'm on my second glass of Prosecco.
What's wrong?
Hang on, sorry, Alistair, my mum's here. She's just... Alistair has got to operate on a dog who swallowed a Christmas sock.
Oh, you need some help.
Yeah, but I've had 2 glasses of bubbles, so...
I haven't.
That's true.
Give me your phone.
Well, I'm just passing you to my mum.
Hi, Alistair? Yeah, I'll be there ASAP. No, it's absolutely fine, honestly. Okay, yeah. See you in a sec.
Oh, Denise.
It's fine.
But it's Christmas.
How will we manage without you? You were in timing.
You'll be okay. It's all under control.
2 minutes ago, you said it was crazy.
It's not like we're short of hands, though.
Well, that's true.
Mind you, I'm not sure anyone is as capable as you.
Oh, can you take over with the gravy, Lily?
Okay. Where are you at?
So just keep stirring it, Faze.
I still can't believe you're acting like this.
Well, I can't believe you didn't talk to me first.
I'm not asking you to pay for it or even a share of it.
Well, I should think not, when I never agreed to it in the first place.
Yeah, all right, you've made that point several times already.
And even if you don't want me to pay any money, you're assuming that he can be kept at the stables.
Well, can't he?
Yeah, probably, but that's not the point.
Okay, sorry I didn't talk to you.
But I just think it was an odd thing to do.
Maybe it was, I didn't think of it like that.
Look, it just caught me by surprise. Do you want to take Ambrose with you?
Yeah, better put Ambrose in, thanks.
We were having this lovely, chilled Christmas morning, and I was even feeling like, look at us. We're so good at this, at being divorced. We're making it work. We're so mature, huh? Then you said I've got another present for Martha, and then it went weird.
I'm sorry.
But it is an amazing present. And Champion is a really beautiful little pony.
So it's not all bad?
You just threw me, Chris. That's all.
Sorry.
Okay, so he's definitely asleep.
Yeah, we just need to clip his hair before the op.
Yeah. Oh, poor thing.
We'll have to keep him in overnight.
Oh, Alistair.
No, it's fine.
Well, it's not much of a Christmas for you.
Well, I'm sorry that I've had to drag you in as well.
You didn't drag me in.
You know what I mean.
Where do you keep the clippers these days?
Oh, Paul's done a bit of reorganising.
Oh, has he now?
That was brilliant. That was amazing.
Oh, we did it.